welcome to the Top Performance Strength Podcast. I am joined by my co-host, Declan Peterson, Jason Acevedo, Complete Baseball Performance, and our special guest today, Brennan Reback. What's up, Brennan?
How we doing?
Doing good. I think it's. I think you were on like the very first podcast we ever did was like that was like 2 to 3 years ago. Is that right? Do you remember that, Declan?
At least
At the old facility.
Yep.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure you were the very first one. So welcome back. It's been a while. This one is long overdue.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know you got. We got written up on the board that you're one of our featured guests over the next few weeks or a few months, or sorry, a couple of months that the college guys are going to be starting to roll back in, and we got 6 parts to go through. So we're going to start here with part 1,
Yes, sir.
discussing your collegiate career. So I guess where do we start with this one?
I don't know. It's been a long one.
100 years old now.
It's been a long one.
We're in year 6, correct?
Yeah, year 6.
Heck yeah.
After some minor setbacks here and there.
Yeah. So it was. I mean, do you want me to go through the whole thing?
Go for it.
Start at Central, and then get us up to speed.
All right. So I started college freshman year as a walk-on at Central Arizona. That was my only offer to play college baseball somewhere, and we got pretty lucky doing that. I was playing in a tournament for Ace in Arizona, and they came to watch someone else. I had a pretty good game, and they gave me an opportunity. Had a pretty good freshman year, kind of put me on the map a little bit. Sophomore year, not as great of a year personally, but we were able to win a national championship. And then from there, I went to Virginia Tech. Was lucky enough to get a pretty good scholarship to play in the ACC. From there, that's kind of where all the challenges began. That was my first year was COVID. After that, I tore my ACL, and after that, I had hamate surgery. So over 3 years, I played less than 40 games, I would say. But now I am doing my graduate year at St. Leo University, one of the better D2s in the country in Florida. In a really good spot, finally healthy again after a long time, and ready to give one of the best baseball seasons college baseball's seen. That's the plan.
Awesome. Let's go back to like your career at Virginia Tech. After you were there, your first year at Virginia Tech was the COVID year, correct?
Yeah.
And then year 2 is when you had suffered the ACL issue.
Yeah, I tore my ACL 2 games into the year.
Okay.
So pretty much right away, I had no season. I redshirted that year.
Right. And how long was that process to come back to return to play?
So I tore my ACL March 10th, had surgery 3 weeks later, April 1st, and then I got cleared to return to play in the middle of November, which was just before 7 months. I was. They originally gave me a 9 to 12 month timeline, and we finished in just under 7. So.
Very nice. And everything has been healthy since then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knee wise, yeah.
Hand wise as well?
After the hamate surgery, we're all good. That one was easy compared to the ACL.
What do you think like are some of the most invaluable lessons you learned going through that rehab process and like kind of keeping your head on a swivel and staying in the game?
Yeah, I mean the first one, the ACL, the big one, definitely like that kind of changed who I am as a person for sure. I think before I got hurt, I had never missed practices, I never missed games, I never had anything that kept me off the field ever, and was pretty lucky to have made it that far without that. But kind of after the first surgery, the biggest adjustment was mentally how to. I had to kind of learn who I was off the baseball field. I kind of had defined myself as a baseball player, and that was kind of all I thought of myself as. And then when that gets taken away from you, it can be a pretty lonely place when you don't know what else you're good at or what else to value.
Bit of an identity crisis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was definitely the biggest thing. I mean, I spent the majority of that 7 months. It was just me, my girlfriend, and my dog by ourselves in school. Everyone else had left, and it was just us, 2 rehab sessions a day, and I started doing therapy and all that sort of stuff, and it was basically just a total rebuild of everything.
So you got back to 100% after the ACL issue.
Yep.
And then
so-
we this is where you started to kind of go down the route of looking at other schools. Like what ultimately led to you making that decision to get out of Virginia Tech and to pursue where you are currently at St. Leo down in Florida?
Yeah, so after my 5th year, I graduated from Virginia Tech, so that was kind of one of the reasons was I'd already gotten my degree, and then just kind of the way my last 3 years had gone, it just felt like it was time for a scenery change. It just I mentally felt like I had done everything that I could do at Virginia Tech, and it was time for me to move on and find a better place for myself personally. Not that that place isn't great. I love Virginia Tech and I love all the people I met there, but it was time for a change, time to move on. So
yeah, we were kind of like discussing this in the weight room yesterday, like some of the cultural differences and some of the differences in leadership and some of the coaches that you were under between like Central Arizona and Virginia Tech. You want to kind of touch base on that, and like I know you had mentioned that Central was a much better place for you from a coaching standpoint as well as from a cultural standpoint.
yeah, I mean, my career is interesting because it's been obviously a long one as far as collegiate careers go, but I've kind of experienced I've been in every role that a baseball team has. I've sat the bench, I've sat out a whole season, I've been the captain of a team, I've been the best player on a team, and everywhere in between. So I feel like I have a pretty good perspective of kind of how different styles of coaching can affect different players and different roles and things like that. And I would say overall what I've learned from the 3 programs is that programs with the most success are programs that value people as individuals more than they value people as baseball players. I think when people feel valued and feel loved and cared for, I think that's when you can do something special, like as a unit.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you guys won a national championship at Central.
Yep. Yeah, we national championship my sophomore year, and then we won the ACC this past spring at Virginia Tech. So lucky enough to have a ring from both places. And
Yeah.
That's the big goal at St. Leo this year. I want to collect a ring from everywhere I've gone. So.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys were sitting number 2 in the nation for the majority of the year last year, I think it was, or was that more towards the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean it was a pretty steady climb. We were in the top 10 the whole year, but yeah, we got up to I think we were either number 2 or 3 overall seed going into the playoffs. We ran through our regional, won our regional, and then we got into a good little battle with Oklahoma in the super regional, and it comes down to a winner take all, and they played better that day. So. That's just what it was.
Yeah, like what are some of the differentiating factors there? It's like when you're playing against, like when you're going head to head against like some of the best teams in the country, it's like anybody can beat anybody on any given day.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I think the team at Tech learned from and kind of where our success kind of to take off as a team was being able to put on our best effort every single day, whether it was, like Friday night in Miami or if it's a Tuesday in West Virginia and we're playing Marshall. Like it once we understood that nothing changes and you have to value your at-bats the same way, you have to value every opportunity you get in the field the same way, value your pitches, that's when the team started to perform better, like consistently. The talent had always been there. It was the ability to win on any given day in any given situation that kind of improved once we took that mindset.
Gotcha. So where are you right now with St. Leo and kind of like your progress on the hitting side of things?
The hitting side of things right now is, I mean, Ace probably knows just as well as I do, but it's pretty much it's just maintenance at this point. I mean, I'm 24 years old, so it's not like we're gonna go through, major changes. We're not gonna change what's gotten me here, and I feel like I'm back to a spot where I'm healthy and I'm moving properly, and that's definitely been helping on the field, just being able to get my swing off and all that sort of stuff.
Ace, let's reel you in. What are you guys focusing on right now?
I mean, the big thing with him is just trying to keep him consistent. I mean, the thing with Brennan,
for a while, he's very athletic, and I feel like sometimes when places he's played, they've tried to take the athleticism out of him, and I don't know if he would agree with that, but you know, we have to learn certain things when we're hitting, right? We try to get him to work on controlling his hip a little bit better. We've been using a phrase, staying sideways, to try to get him to enter the zone a little bit cleaner. But a lot of it is just letting him get to a good spot and then letting his athleticism take over. I think a lot of times you watch elite hitters, like they get to consistent spots and then their adjustability is based on their athletic abilities, their abilities to react. Like they get set, but then the good stuff about them takes over. And I think a lot of times what we run into, and it's not just him, I mean across the board in college baseball, high school baseball, it's coaches want their own say on things. They want to make you do stuff that they want you to do. And we've talked about it, and I've talked about it more so with Flaherty than Brennan, but like, you know, when you actually are on the coaching side for a long time, you see it's very difficult to run team practices and try to individualize stuff for guys, right? So what you usually do as a coach is go, okay, here's my big 4 drills that I think are going to help the collective whole, right? And that's not always the best route, but you know, when you're given a limitation on time, which you know, Brennan's learned the difference between junior college and NCAA. Junior college, you can practice pretty much every day throughout the entire year.
Oh yeah.
NCAA, there's very tight restrictions on how many team practices you get, how many group sessions you get for your individual work. So, you know, I've seen it more prevalent in the NCAA where you kind of just run practices where the plan is the plan and you don't really deviate from it much. You get a little bit more work done in your individuals and your group stuff. So I think a lot of hitters get stuck into this. Oh, I had to do this drill, I had to do this drill, it's not great for my swing. So I understand it from both sides. One as a player, like, hey, here's things that work for me and they're making me do this. But then from the coach's side, you're trying to give them stuff that you think will help the group as a whole. And like you're thinking about the team. It's a difficult line to distinguish. Like, how are we going to individualize it for guys versus how are we going to give like the most bang for our buck with the team? And you know, what I deal with on my side of it is I'm more the individual hitting coach with these guys, so we can get a little bit more distinct and get back to things that we know work for him versus getting stuck into, well, he was forced to do X, Y, and Z drill, or they were reliant on this piece of technology or this tool, and it might not necessarily fit his individual needs.
Yeah, we kind of see this across the board on every level, like especially in high school. Like when our high school guys will go off and play high school in the springtime and they get away from like somebody like yourself or some of the other coaches they've worked with for the whole off season, and they're having success with what they're doing, and then they go into that type of setting, whether it's in the high school setting or the collegiate setting, and like you said, there's maybe less individualization because it's more of a team setting, and like you have your so-called selective drills that you're going to do with a team. Without that type of individualization, and it's like, oh, you're being forced to do something that may not necessarily benefit you. So, is that something you would say that? I know this is something that you had mentioned that you were struggling with a little bit at Tech, right? Because you went from Central Arizona, where I think you were having more success offensively, and then some things were kind of being tinkered with to a point where you weren't having the success that you wanted as a hitter.
Yeah, I think. I mean, as I've been around for longer and kind of gotten better perspective on certain things, as a player, you have to understand that your coaches aren't doing stuff purposely to mess with you. Your coaches, this is their job, right? Mm-hmm. This is how your coaches, in college, this is how your coaches get paid. This is how they put food on their family's table. So if you're not producing, or if you're not doing what they believe you should be doing, they feel as though they need to impact that because it directly impacts their life, which is, as a player, you have to respect that, because I would like baseball to be my livelihood and how I put food on my family's table. So you have to understand that from their perspective, but at the same time, you have to value yourself as an individual. And I think the most important thing that I've learned kind of through coming back and hitting with Ace in the off season and then going back out to school is like, you have to be your own hitting coach. Like, you have to be.
Yeah.
You know, if I need to be able to take things that me and Ace work on, and then I need to truly understand them and understand why they work for me. So when I go back to school and I'm getting challenged with these different drills, I can come back to what I know works for me, and I don't need, not that I don't need Jason, but me and Jason have worked together for so long, you know what I mean? I have that knowledge of what works for me now. And now I can give Ace a call and maybe we talk over a couple points, but at this point it's more of we almost collaborate on the swing. I would say like I value Jason's eyes and his opinion because he has seen me from the time I was 15 till now 24. So
Yeah, and that's what it comes back to, is having that level of experience where you can, you've been educated over the years and now you have the knowledge base where you can be more self-sufficient and you can be more dependable upon yourself as like you said, as far as being your own hitting coach.
Exactly.
But I mean, that's in relation to everything else we do. Like we have these conversations all the time when it comes to what we do from an athletic development perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest struggle with kids in college a lot of times is like you get in such a good routine at home in places like this, like you get to have a really good routine, you do the same things every day, which is awesome. You should be, but you can't become reliant on your environment or the people around you. You need to be reliant on yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think you look at the best baseball players, it doesn't matter what time of day, how they feel, none of that matters. It doesn't matter if they have their personal hitting coach with them, where they are. You know what I mean? You can suit up and get the job done, and I think that's something that you need to be able to take in your training too. You know, if you're not in the perfect scenario at your school or something like that, like you should still be able to make the adjustments and understand what you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely building upon that. I've seen it the last 2 years in pro ball. Since getting from college into pro ball, I was a little bit surprised just how much more freedom I had in pro ball. You know, I didn't know, I knew what to expect somewhat, but some of the ins and outs, especially from the coaching side of things, usually we only have, in independent ball, we only have like 2 full-time coaches, a manager, and in my case, last 2 years, we've had a pitching coach. So we really haven't had like a true hitting coach. I mean, kind of our manager, but, if we're speaking from the hitting side of things, I mean, I didn't really have to do things, as my, say my college coach wanted things. I could do things how I wanted to do it. And I had a lot more freedom, and it ties into how you were saying you have to be your own best hitting coach because, when I'm, miles and miles, thousands of miles away from home and I don't have Ace or my buddy Jeremy or any other people who I value in the hitting community to help me, how am I going to, make these little adjustments, from, pitch to pitch, at bat to at bat, that are going to keep me in the lineup, with it being so cutthroat in pro ball. I mean, if you have one bad game, you're probably going to be on the bench a lot of the time, unless you're like the best player on the team, which when you're playing with other guys that have been in pro ball for 5-6 years, that's usually not the case. If you have one bad game, you're on the bench. You have 2 bad games, you're like now the main pinch hitter, and you have a couple bad games, and then you're getting sent back home. So it's very nerve-wracking. So, it's interesting how you bring that into like not being reliant on your environment and the people around you. And it's good to have those people, especially for the college guys that come home during break or the high school guys that get time to spend with, their individualized, coaches and trainers and stuff like that. But also realizing that you have to really pay like key attention to certain things in order to problem solve as quick as possible on your own.
Yeah, would you say you're in a better position now where you have more of the freedom and autonomy to make those decisions on your own?
Definitely.
Right.
I think first of all, I think over the last few years of pretty much just being in a training, rehab, building it back up state, I've gotten a better understanding of why I'm successful and what makes me successful, which I think helps. First of all, is just understanding yourself. But yeah, I mean that was probably the biggest reason that I decided to go to St. Leo was I had a great connection with their coaches and they value me as I am, and they want me to be myself and they don't ask me to deviate from that. Which when you can show up and if I can just show up and be Brennan every day, that's a good situation for me. That's a situation I feel like I can be successful in. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way, and that was a part of the reason why, just culturally and what I needed personally as a player. I needed a little bit more freedom, and that was part of the reason why I transferred after my sophomore year after I injured my knee. And it was just such a better like situation for me because I knew what I needed to do and I trusted and believed in what had worked for me. And then I went off, and sometimes you just need a change of scenery and atmosphere and culture, and that's what I did. And then that's when I really started to take off again in baseball and propelled me into the pro sphere. But something else I wanted to touch upon was also realizing that you touched upon, Brennan, was how these coaches, a lot of the times, they're not intentionally trying to make you worse or anything like that. A lot of guys, and I see it in pro ball too, because this is how they feed their families and this is their job. Especially if you do start scuffling even just a little bit, they start to bombard you with a lot of information and stuff like that. And it's really important as a player to sift through that and filter through that to make sure that you don't mentally get all screwed up, because it's really easy to just, next thing you know, you're like, man, I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know how to hit a ball, and you're just bombarded with so much information. And, I get it when coaches are trying to help guys, but as a player, at the end of the day, it's your career, and it's on you to understand how to mentally sift through all that and make sure that you are ready to suit up like you stated.
Yeah, I mean, that just goes back to knowing yourself, right? Like, I think you should always be curious, and you should always be interested in what like people have to say and kind of their ideas, but it's a balance. I think a lot of times you see players like will get a new idea from someone and then jump ship and just go full on into that.
That was me when I was, especially in high school. I thought everyone was, everything that my coaches said was like the truth and the gospel. So I would hear one thing from one coach and I would totally change everything, as opposed to what I would do now is I would listen. I'd be like, okay, let me see how I interpret that or how I really feel about that, and maybe try to apply it. And if I liked it, maybe continue to build upon it. But if not, then throw it away. I'm not saying like it's a very fine balance between listening what other coaches and people have to say. Say like we're just talking about hitting, what they have to say about hitting. And it's good to sift through that information and think about and process what they're saying and how they're explaining things. But at the end of the day, realizing you don't have to apply everything exactly how they say it. You can try it, but it's a great point. Don't just jump ship, especially with stuff that has really worked for you in the past.
Yeah, a good coach is never going to take away from what like any athlete is having success with. So, I want to get everybody's perspective here, from a player's perspective, from Brennan, and from Declan, and then from a coach's perspective from Ace. But it's like, for like a lot of the young guys that listen to the podcast, for a lot of the young guys that are around youth and the high school guys, and even some of the other college guys that may not necessarily know how to approach their coaches on this subject. But it's like, how are you gonna? What kind of advice would you give to like one of these young players in terms of how they should approach their coach when they try to make these adjustments that they don't believe are best serving them? Because I know this is I know you guys have been through this probably numerous times throughout your career. I know I did when I was younger. I'm sure Ace did too, as well as every other baseball player. But it's just about getting on the same page and working together as a unit to get the best possible outcome for the player.
It's right? Tough. I know, like for me when I was a player. It doesn't help that I'm very outspoken and opinionated and extroverted, so like I'm not afraid to say how I feel to people. But I had to realize, and this was great, like I was very, very, like when I transferred to Franciscan, the coach there, Rick Carver, I was so honest up front with him about everything. But I had to make sure if I was going to disagree, say like he was teaching something, I was like, wow, I really don't believe in this, or I think this is going to hinder me. I would listen to him in practice, then the next day I would go to his office and just talk to him one-on-one. And I'd say, hey, like I don't agree with this. This is why I don't agree with this, and here's what I want to do instead. I even had it for like he gave us a weightlifting program that he wanted, like just a blanket program. It was probably, it looked like a bodybuilder program from like the mid to late 90s, kind of. That's what it looked like, something that he'd gotten from a coach at the ABCA Coaches Convention. He thought it'd be a good idea, and I knew, given some of the guys, like it was going to be a horrible fit. So, this is a prime example. I had knowledge of what we should do, reasoning behind why we should do it. So what I did is I went up to him and I told him, hey, I don't think we should do this. I gave him like a sample program of, the 3 or 4 day split of what we should do as a team, and here's why. And he looked at it for a couple minutes, didn't say anything, and I was scared as hell. I didn't know how he was going to react. He's like, all right, I kind of like this. Now I'm going to have the guys vote upon what they wanted to do. And surprisingly, to my surprise, out of the 35 guys we had on the team, 25 or 30 of the guys wanted to work with me and do this program that I put front. Same thing with hitting. There was things like he would get mad or a little bit upset about how I would approach hitting or how I would perform, and I would just talk with him after games, maybe a day or two after, and say, this is what I was doing, this is what I was thinking, and we would just talk things out. So I think it's not all coaches are as approachable. So, I was really blessed to have that situation there. If you are, even if the guy is tough as nails and kind of resistant to talking with players, if you're going to do it, you have to do it one-on-one. And usually off the ball field, I like to say, talk with them, especially in their office or when they're doing something else. And then also to be really knowledgeable about what you want to bring up and talk with about your coach. Be very well-rounded and well-versed in the points you want to bring up and how you want to articulate what it is that you're going to say.
Yeah.
For me, I don't think I don't have anything on how to talk to your coaches about things like that. I think at the end of the day, what I always come back to is if you are giving them the best option to win baseball games, you will be on the field. So you can either do that someone else's way or you can do it your way, but it falls on you either way, which me and Ace have talked about numerous times, is that it's my career, so
Yep.
I'm either going to do it my way, and if it doesn't work, I can live with that, or I'm going to do it someone else's way and wonder what happened if I did it my way.
Yep.
Yeah, I say it to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Because
All of us have gone through that, I think.
Because at the end of the day, that's what, you learn from experience, right? And I try to, as a coach, on the coach side of it, prevent people from making the mistakes I made, right? Like, as a coach, yes, I had some success for a while as a player, but when I had my failures, it was trying to figure out what things I did wrong and try to prevent the players that I work with now from making those mistakes. And one of the biggest things I made a mistake of was allowing someone to change something that worked for me because I thought they knew better. It was the world's different now. Back then, there wasn't all these social media platforms that people can literally open up Instagram or Twitter or something and find a piece of hitting advice that might work for them, right? Like, we didn't have that, so you rely on the fact is, hey, like, these guys are Division I baseball coaches, like, they know what they're talking about, and it's not that they're not intelligent, it just might not be something that works for you. So, like, I remember having this speech I got the same speech from my assistant coach in junior college. He saw me play, he goes, you look like shit. He goes, fact of the matter is, he goes, at the end of the day, you gotta look in the mirror and be happy with it, right? And he goes, if you're doing it your way, there's a good chance if it doesn't work out, you can live with the fact because you gave it your all and you thought that was best and didn't work. But if you're sitting there and you're changing everything about who you are, partly you lose your identity as a hitter, as a pitcher, whatever it is, but you start getting resentment towards the other people, and it's really tough to play when you feel like everyone's out to get you. The problem, I think the big problem with Division I is, and Brennan can probably attest to this, it's very much more selfish than other levels because everyone has a chance to get drafted. Every player has a chance. They're all talented. When you're at that level, everyone's got talent to get to the next level for the most part. But it's who performs the best, but a lot of times, like, it's not as much a team thing as so much like a junior college or, me going to a Division III powerhouse. Like, our whole goal as a team was to win a national championship. 99% of the people on that team knew that they were going to be working when they're done with school. They were going to get jobs. But Division I, everyone's close. You're one step away from that next level.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference in levels makes a huge difference because, I didn't enjoy my time in Division I, but I think a lot of it was that. It was, while I had teammates I was buddies with, I could hang out with, we were all kind of out for ourselves, and you start, like, if something doesn't work, it's like you almost start, like, you're mad at yourself, but you're also mad at somebody else for doing, this coach taught me this coach taught, and then you're just in a bad place, and you're not in a good place. It's really tough to perform.
Yeah, it's not like an easy thing to hear, but once you get to a level of baseball that is competitive and people's livelihoods are at stake and lots of money is at stake, you need to understand that nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like, nobody cares how you feel. Nobody cares what happens to you. The only person that's going to care is you. So, as hard as that may be to hear or to take in, it's once you can understand that the only person that's going to value you and your abilities as much as yourself is probably your mom and dad, and they don't get to put you on a baseball field the majority of the time. So it's good to be selfish in that way of I'm going to do whatever I need to do to put myself in the best position to be successful, but I think you can do that in a way that respects your teammates, respects your coaches, and helps push everything in the right direction as a team. I think when you can do that, you're putting yourself in a spot to be respected by everyone, whether or not it works out well.
Yeah. Very well said.
I think too, like, just, you know, winning changes a lot of stuff too. You know, like, as a player, like you said, every player, doesn't matter what level, I shouldn't say like just Division I, like every level you want to play, you want the opportunities, you want to do all this,
absolutely.
but those conversations don't get as foggy when the team's winning, right? Like, I mean, just using, you know, Carthage, when I was a player, you know, we were the number 2 ranked team in the nation. When you're winning, no one says a word, right? You start losing, literally, we lost our first game, and then all of a sudden, like, well, I should be playing. We wouldn't have lost if I was like, you get that, the chatter starts coming out,
Yep.
right? So, like, at every level, like I said, you want to be successful as an individual because, like Brennan was saying, if you're successful as an individual, there's a great chance if multiple people are successful individuals, the team's going to do pretty well. But
Correct.
it's way easier to be successful when the team's winning because, you know, the pressure's not on there. You're not, I mean, Brennan's lived it as a role player coming off injuries. Like, you know, there's times he probably couldn't do anything. He goes, well, shit, we're winning. Like, this is great. But, like, it's not that he didn't want to be out there. He wanted to be out there, but it's like, hey, you might as well try to win a championship or something if we're in this role. So it's like, it's tough because every level as a player you have to be selfish. Like, and I always tell people that, like, you want them to be selfish in a way where they don't just give up. They don't just give, like, okay, I'm on the bench, like, I'm okay with that. Like, you just deal with it and you get ready for the opportunity when it arises. But I think as a coach, it's way easier to play players when they're on the bench who are supportive of one another, as opposed to the kid that's constantly on the bench sulking and
Well, yeah,
complaining.
I'm sure. Like, I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm sure, like, while everybody has the goal of getting drafted and playing at the next level and taking their career as far as possible, and as far as like having the goal of playing at in the MLB, like, I'm sure everybody is still helpful and supportive of one another, right? Was that your experience at Virginia Tech and Central Arizona? Is that kind of where you're at right now, or is it kind of different from college to college?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like players are concerned, I mean, I can't speak for college baseball as a whole, but the programs I've been a part of have been programs where, you know, everyone player-wise, like, we really valued each other and wanted to see each other succeed. I think
Yeah, it's not like anybody's out there trying to sabatage your career, right, by any
not at all.
means.
I mean, that's something that I experienced. Like, it doesn't matter what level you play at. Like, that's I mean, everyone's going to tell you that, but
Right.
that's the biggest part about college baseball is the people you get to meet, and
Right.
you know, the best men in my wedding are all my groomsmen. They're going to be
Yeah.
my teammates.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
So
right.
that's something you can always fall back to, and then I think, like I mentioned earlier, that's when you're going to find success on the field as a team. Like, like the storm is coming during the season. Like,
Yeah.
baseball season's long. The storm is coming. It's inevitable. Like, you're going to hit that spot.
Yep.
And, you know, when a storm hits, if you're in a group and you huddle together, it's not going to be great, but you're going to be able to get through it a little bit better than if you're doing it by yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, baseball's interesting to think about in this way, right? Because it's a team sport where you're evaluated individually every single day. So it's being able to balance. I will do whatever I need to do to be able to put my best self on the field individually, but it's understanding that
Yeah.
it is for a bigger purpose
Yeah.
than simply yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Ace had mentioned, like you were more of a role player this past year, and I'm sure it was incredibly challenging being on the bench, playing for the number 2 team in the country, and I'm sure you had the belief in yourself, and I'm sure your teammates had the belief in you that if you were to go out in the field, you would produce and do your job.
Yeah,
But I mean, how were you able to keep yourself ready, and more so mentally ready as well for when that time came?
I think the answer is pretty simple. It's that I really like to win. I'm really, really competitive, and I think when I was put in a spot where, I wasn't, there would be, last year there were weeks, probably months, where I didn't touch the field. And then, I probably didn't log into a game for probably a month and a half, and then I was called on to pinch run and steal a base in the rain in an extra inning ball game, coming off of probably 9 months off of an ACL, but I felt like I was ready and locked in during those games because I genuinely care about winning, whether or not I'm on the field. Having been exposed to teams where winning is the standard, that is now my standard. I consider myself a winner, and whether or not I'm on the field, I feel like I'm impacting whether or not my team, comes out with a W or not.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've experienced it plenty of times at different colleges. I would say this past season, I definitely went through it. I started off the year super well, and then I hurt my back. Missed a few games from that because I couldn't even rotate. It was literally impossible to rotate. And then made things really difficult. And around the same time, we started losing games. This is about middle of the season. So around that time, we started to make a change because we needed some more pitching. We started trading a lot of players. We also got some new positional guys. So there was probably, 4 or 5 of us that were either rookies or this was our second season who got a lot of our at-bats cut because we tried to bring in some new players who were good players, but we still continued to lose. So the manager, because he's trying to do the best he can because, he wants to, probably move up levels and make sure he gets paid well and stuff. We started, mixing and matching lots of different lineups and players. So there was a lot of us who wouldn't play for 2, 3, 4 games in a row. And it was, if you got a couple hits, you're in the game the next day. And then if you didn't, you were on the bench for another couple days. And it was really difficult, for me mentally, because also around that time I also got food poison then a couple weeks later, and I lost about 15 pounds in the middle of the season. So I was in this horrible spot where I'd gotten injured, then I'd gotten severely sick, lost a bunch of weight, and also I was competing with spots with multiple different guys. But I'd been in this situation before where I had to mentally, battle with guys and stay ready physically as well to be ready to play once my name was called. And then by the end of the year, by the last part of the season, I wound up getting my starting job back because I did stay locked in and ready mentally and physically for when my time would come. And there was a lot of times where I'd be sitting on the bench or we'd be doing early work and nobody else would want to. Everybody would just want to relax and pretty much just show and go. And I'm like, man, is this even worth it to go through these extra things? People probably think I'm crazy or that this is totally stupid, but I knew in my heart that it's what I had to do in order to be physically and mentally prepared and ready to go. And once my time came, I was ready to go and wound up getting playing time towards the end of the season and a starting role that I had at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, let's go into a discussion about injury. Like we had mentioned, both I know both of you guys have suffered your fair share of injuries, and we don't need to go into everyone into detail. Same thing with myself and Ace, because this would be probably a 5-hour podcast if we were to go about doing that. But I think what I respect most about you guys is that you're not just sitting on the sidelines sulking for a 9-month period Unless maybe you were, I could be wrong about that.
I mean, I've been
but,
there.
yeah, but I mean, like, for as challenging as it is to deal with mentally, because it definitely, like you had mentioned, does change your character, and you start to learn more about yourself, which I think is completely necessary from a standpoint of growth, especially learning how to overcome challenges and setbacks, because that's going to better prepare you for what lies ahead in life in general. But like, you guys have a mentality of like, okay, I'm going to find a way to get the job done, because you always have your end goal in mind, or you have your mission in line, and you have a bigger purpose. So like, can you speak to that as far as like going through that injury process and like finding a way to continually get the job done and make forward progress?
Yeah, you want to start or you want me to? Yeah, I think for me, like, I really started to experience some major injuries once I became like 16, 17. The first real major one was when I was a junior in high school, and on our Florida trip, I dislocated my kneecap, and I missed about 8-10 weeks of baseball. So I got hurt like the second game, and I wasn't ready. So that was probably sometime beginning of March, and I wasn't cleared to start playing until like end of May. Like, I think it was like the last week in May. So I missed a good chunk of time, and I remember, mentally, like, I was in a horrible place, and I remember I got like really just like down about life and the world. And I think, speaking upon what like Brennan was saying, I had so much of my identity wrapped up in baseball, and I still felt guilty of it, a lot of the time. But it's definitely something I've worked on. I know in the past when I've gotten injuries, like that one in particular, I really got to a horrible, horrible mental state. I still did stuff here and there, but, looking back, there was definitely more I could have done, as opposed to, sulking and, being caught up in, woe is me, and, just being, honestly mentally soft and not mature enough. I did do stuff, but looking back, there was more that I could have done, as opposed to now, I'm dealing with a little bit of a minor, back setback in the last week and a half or so. And things are slowly progressing. I think I'll be good within the next 5 to 7 days. But, I knew right away, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to need to do something in order to stay sharp. So I've just had to get very creative with my training, and make sure that it still is, even if it's not physically very taxing, at least mentally and neurologically, there still are things that I can do in order to stay sharp and whatnot. But that just comes with time, and having a big injury like that before any of the other ones I've had, having a lot of realization. It's very, I think, a lot of people don't talk about it, at least I don't hear it when you go through injuries. There's some sort of a grieving process of, you're like, wow, there's like denial, like I can't believe like this happened, and then you go through all these mini stages leading up to where you finally accept it. And I think I've gotten a lot better at bridging the gap between the stage of, denial and acceptance when it comes to an injury. I'm much better at accepting when I have little setbacks. But okay, this is going to hinder me for a little bit. This isn't the end of the world. This is a little, mini bump in the road. What can I do, as opposed to focusing on, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. And not only does that screw with you mentally, but also physically, it takes away from all the time you could be focusing on other areas of your life or your baseball career where you can get better. So I think it's really important to, accept the injury and take it for what it is, but just give your absolute most. And you're going to have to get, like for me, I've had to get really creative the last week and a half in order to stay sharp, because I'm still training and trying to progress my pro career. So I can't just not do anything, you know what I mean?
Of course.
So it's accepting what it is, and then just getting really creative with what you can work with, and just making the most of what you have. That's what I would say.
For me, the injuries and the mindset was pretty simple. It's just the overarching belief, which has kind of been the theme of my college career, is that I bet on myself, and I believe in my abilities, and I believe as far as my future goes, I believe that if you're talented enough to play in the big leagues will find you no matter where you are. And it's just the belief in yourself that, no matter what obstacle is in your way, that the end goal is still possible. And then it's just a so what now what mentality that this has happened to me, and what's the next step I have to take? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
the course is going to change all the time, but my junior college coach used to say there's a million ways to the top, and you only have to find one. You know, so there's a lot of different ways to get there. And
How true that is.
That's evident in, you know, all aspects of life. Obviously, not just baseball, but
Yeah.
I think just the constant belief is what you need. You know, I think it's, especially in baseball, if you don't think you're the shit, you're not.
Right.
It's just what it is.
Yeah. So having the end goal in mind, obvious goal being to get drafted this year, going into your final season in college baseball. Like, what kind of season are you expecting? Like, what do you need to do this year to get there?
Well, I think that's another thing I've learned is no matter what you think is going to happen during a season, it's not.
It's not going to go that way, at least.
It's not going to go that way. It's never going to go how you expected. But I feel healthier than I have throughout my whole college career. I feel just as strong, just as fast as ever, and I feel like I'm a whole lot tougher as far as my mental goes, which I think will help you through a long season. I mean, my plan is to put on one of the best college baseball seasons that there has been. That's my goal, and that's kind of what the goal always is. I think everyone's goals should be, you know, unrealistic to most.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Unrealistic goals for yourself as well, Declan?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's trying to finalize where I'm going to be playing next season. I have a couple opportunities in the Pecos League. I do not plan on going back to Santa Fe where I've played the last 2 seasons, but I have had the new manager there reach out to me. If I do wind up going back, I'll probably either be going to the team in Roswell, New Mexico, won the championship last year, or one of the new expansion teams in Blackwell, Oklahoma. But my goal is to stay around here and play in the Frontier League with a team like the Winnie City Thunderbolts, who I've talked with before, or the Joliet Slammers, Schaumburg Boomers, teams like that. But my goal is probably to try to make it up to the Frontier League, and you know, if not, then I'll be going back to the Pecos League probably for another season. And you know, I have more of a reputation now that I've played a couple years, and something I've had a lot of managers reach out to me about is the fact that I can play multiple positions, and I'm known as a really good defender. So a lot of guys value that because, you know, offense obviously is king, but at the same time, in the Pecos League in particular, it's very lopsided defensive talent or performance compared to offensive. A lot of the teams really struggle. So you'll see plenty of games where it's, you know, 12-8, but there's 7 errors made between the 2 teams. So, you know, especially a lot of the older managers or managers that have managed there for a few years are kind of sick and tired of their defense sucking. So defense is actually somewhat of a commodity out in that league in particular, especially with a lot of the fields are in bad playing conditions. But yeah, man, I think for me it's you know, getting back to 100%, getting healthy, and then continue to progress. You know, this offseason just continuing to work on being consistent with my power. From the live at bats that I have gotten against other pro or higher level college guys in the area, I have been doing exceptional, way better than last year. So my training has definitely been keeping me ready for that. So I'm going to kind of stay the course with that, and then just continually to get ready for the season, and probably be leaving around March, end of February to March, for either a spring league that I'll be playing in down in Houston, Texas, or just for all the various number of tryouts all over the country.
Very nice.
Yeah, man.
All right, so last topic. It wouldn't be a strength and conditioning podcast if we didn't discuss strength and conditioning. So, Brennan, like, it's when you got home last week, the first thing I had mentioned to you was like how much fun it was for me to write your programming, because I'm writing so many programs for youth and high school athletes that it gets very boring and redundant for me. It's like I don't feel like I'm being challenged. So, not to say that there isn't challenges here and there with certain athletes when it comes to helping them get get the results they want. But we've been together for, I think, going into our 8th off season now, so it's been a lot of fun for me to be able to program for you, and of course, like having the equipment and having the tools and the resources that we have access to now. So you want to kind of touch on that and kind of like what the goals are right now and what we're focusing on addressing with you to take your performance to another level here.
Yeah, I mean, our biggest thing in the weight room is that, our biggest goal is to stay healthy for a whole
Always.
season.
Always.
That's more than anything. That's kind of that is my overarching purpose and theme in the weight room is to do the little things right and pay attention to the details in there, because that's what's, that's the difference between, having to take midweek games off and playing 45 games a year, or being able to go out every day and play center field and get my 65 games in and 350 at-bats or whatever it is. And
Right.
that's easily my biggest goal, and I think that the weight room is probably the best way to do that.
Yeah.
For us, as far as my body weight is where it's supposed to be, my body composition is where it's supposed to be. That's something that, obviously having not played a whole ton of baseball games over the last 3 years, it's been, my body is where it should be. It hasn't taken a toll from, playing games or anything like that. So it's, how quickly can we transfer that power?
Yeah.
And the majority of what you and I are doing right now is stuff that essentially translates directly to the baseball field.
Yeah.
And will directly impact, performance.
Yeah.
More so than maybe, another standard lift.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that's been our biggest goal. A lot of rotational stuff that we've been doing. All of that stuff is, I think, probably a big part of the future of, fitness and baseball.
Yeah, definitely. Especially that you have access to the Proteus now and some of the tech we have where we can monitor, bar speed or velocity with whether it's, doing a speed press with a bench press or whether it's doing a trap bar jump like we did yesterday, utilizing the Proteus for a full body rotational shot put in contrast with a med ball throw today where I had you hooked up to the push bands and, like I said, the speed press where we could hook up the speed sensor and we're working with a certain velocity range to make sure that we're maintaining or staying above a specific range within that velocity range. And you had mentioned that one of the biggest benefits you've seen so far is just, again, how quickly you're able to apply force within those specific planes, specifically a rotational plane, which incredibly important, obviously, for you to be able to hit and throw hard. You're already kind of noticing a difference in terms of just how much lighter and faster you are at the plate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I definitely feel like I'm rotating, in my swing probably better than I have been previously, which is obviously a pretty big deal as far as baseball players go. But yeah, I think just being able to do all that stuff that we're working on, and then putting me in a setting with all the measurements, and Kip puts me in an environment where I'm forced to compete with myself every rep, and I think that really brings out the best in me. Especially like Ace mentioned earlier, my strength has always been my athleticism, and being able to challenge that and compete with my level every day is really beneficial. It's something that is not easy to come by, an environment that forces you to give your very all each rep. So
All right, so Ace, we had this conversation in the past, and I actually just had this conversation with a good buddy of ours, Joe Farrow, who's another hitting coach in the area, and he works with some pro guys. Jack Swinski with the Pirates, and one of the things that he mentioned was that, Jack on any given day could probably hit 110 plus exit velocity, but that doesn't mean that every swing you take, that's the focus. And I know we had this conversation earlier today as well. He might be sitting, maybe 95 to 100. I'm sure the same could be said for you as well as for you, but how do you go about kind of changing the emphasis, or what is the goal on any specific day or any specific drill that you're working on?
I think it just depends on the hitter. I feel like every time you ask me a hitting question, I usually end up saying it depends on the hitter, right? I think it depends on where they are, right? I have a kid who is, 18 years old and he is hitting the ball 82 miles an hour, then our big emphasis is on speed,
Yeah.
trying to increase that. Versus a lot of guys who have that higher velocity, the big focus is on consistency and direction and things of that regard. So I think a lot of it just comes down to what are the athlete's needs at that point. I mean, we have to hit the ball hard. There's no doubt about it. If you're not hitting it hard consistently, the odds of succeeding at a high level are slim still. I mean, yes, we get lucky and we have miss hits that can produce good results in terms of singles, doubles, but if we're trying to be as consistent as possible, we have to be able to hit the ball hard. But in terms of the training, part of it, like I said, where they are, how they move, how are they feeling on that day, because I think that's the big thing a lot of kids struggle with is they want to go kind of balls to the wall all the time, but they had 2 hours of sleep. And you go, well, probably not going to create the best results in that amount of time. I had a kid get a lesson with me a couple days ago. It was on 2 hours of sleep during the lesson. I went, what do we expect to see during this? So I think a lot of it is, like I said, we can get more detail on a different day into kind of how we look at each hitter and how we, or thrower for that matter, and how we try to create the max velocities and all that stuff and help them progress to hitting harder and harder.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it is just learning to read the individual as well.
Correct. I mean, if you want to use my situation personally, like I am someone who, based on my size and frame, there's not a whole lot of room for strength and growth left before it becomes counterproductive and I start to lose my mobility, my athleticism, my speed, all of those things that make me successful. So one thing Ace tells me a lot is, if the ball, a wall scraper counts just as much as a ball that clears the scoreboard. Like they're both homers. So if you're at a point where you're producing enough exit velocity that you believe is, if you're producing what you believe is enough exit velocity, then your focus should be consistency. Your focus should be how often can I put the barrel on the baseball, and then if we're doing that on a consistent basis and we're strong, then you're probably in shape for
You're in the right direction.
a lot of good things to happen for you.
Yeah. I mean, I like to tell my hitters to flirt with that line of losing control, right? Like
Exactly.
figure out how hard you can swing without losing control, or where you start to lose control, and then just take it down a notch, because we don't want to risk barrel accuracy. We don't want to risk, increasing our swing and misses. Understanding we're going to swing and miss is crucial. It's going to happen a lot, but as a hitter, we have to be able to adjust and adapt and not swing and miss 3 times in an at bat, right? Like we got to put ourselves in the best position to be able to put the best swing on a ball possible, but then also be okay with our B, C, D, F, whatever letter you want to call swing, where if I stick my barrel out on 2 strikes trying to fight and I flip a ball over the third baseman's head for a hit,
That works.
it's a win. Because when you get to that level, the higher levels,
Oh boy.
a win's a win.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's really how often can I take my best swing on time?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're taking your best swing on time, whether that's, your feels are going to be different for every single person. But at the end of the day, if you're producing your A swing and you're getting it off at the right times and you're making the right decisions, then you're in good shape.
Yeah.
From there, it's just keeping it.
Fellas, on that note, I think we'll wrap it up here for the first part. Like we had mentioned before the show, we could probably go into like 6 parts, if not more.
Yeah, probably.
But this is a good start. So, Brennan, thanks for attending. Hope to have you back soon. Excited to have you on for the next 5 or 6 weeks. So we're going to get after it and excited to see you have a good season this year.
Let's do it. Let's go hit.
All right, guys. Peace.